The sun was dropping low over Route 66, painting the sky in dull orange and red when the biker rolled into the old gas station on the edge of town. His motorcycle was loud, heavy, and impossible to ignore, just like him. People inside the store glanced through the dusty windows and quickly looked away. In this small American town, everyone knew his kind. Leather jacket scarred by years on the road, beard rough, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. He carried a reputation that made strangers uneasy and locals silent. The gas station sat between a long stretch of highway and a quiet road that led into town. Trucks thundered past without slowing, shaking the ground with their speed. The biker parked near the pump, cut the engine, and swung his leg down. The sudden silence felt heavy. He stretched his shoulders, feeling the familiar ache of long miles, and started toward the store. Near the edge of the road stood a young girl, no older than 12. She clutched a small backpack to her chest, waiting to cross. Her eyes followed the traffic nervously. She noticed the biker and stiffened. She had heard the stories too, everyone had. But something else caught her attention. A truck in the distance was coming too fast, its engine roaring louder than the others, drifting slightly out of its lane. The biker stepped closer to the road, unaware. His back was turned, focused on lighting a cigarette, his mind far away from the present moment. The girl's heart began to race. She looked at the truck, then at the biker. No one else was paying attention. The store clerk was busy. The road felt suddenly dangerous, like time itself was speeding up. "Be careful," she cried out, her voice sharp and desperate. The words cut through the air. The biker froze mid-step. Instinct kicked in. He turned just as the truck blasted past, missing him by only a few feet. The wind from it snapped his jacket and knocked his cigarette from his fingers. The sound was deafening, followed by a long, uneasy silence. For a moment, no one moved. The biker stood still, heart pounding harder than it had in years. He stared at the road, then slowly looked back toward the girl. She was pale, breathing fast, her warning still hanging between them. He had faced danger his whole life, rough roads, bad weather, and worse people, but this was different. This danger had come quietly, without warning, and a stranger's voice had pulled him back just in time. People began to murmur. Someone laughed nervously inside the store. The biker pushed his sunglasses up onto his forehead, revealing tired eyes filled with surprise. He looked at the spot where the truck had passed, then back at the girl again. No one had ever looked out for him before. Not like that. As he took a slow breath, something shifted inside him. Part 1 of his story didn't end with fear or violence, but with a single warning that changed everything. The biker stayed where he was, the echo of the truck still ringing in his ears. Slowly, he walked away from the road, each step heavier than the last. He looked again at the young girl standing near the curb. She hadn't moved. Her hands were clenched tight around the straps of her backpack, her face still tense with fear and shock. For years, people had looked at him with suspicion, sometimes with hate. Parents pulled their children closer when he passed. Store owners watched him carefully. But now, a child had shouted to protect him without hesitation. That thought unsettled him more than the speeding truck ever could. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low and rough from years of shouting over engines and wind. The girl nodded, though her legs trembled. I think so," she said. "That truck, it didn't slow down." He crouched slightly, not too close, careful not to scare her. Up close, his face showed its age, lines from the sun, scars from old roads, and eyes that had seen too much. Yet there was no anger in them now, only gratitude and something like regret. "You did good," he said quietly. "You saved me." She blinked, surprised. "I just yelled," she replied. "Anyone would've." He shook his head. "No, most people look away." Those words carried weight. He knew them well because he had lived them. People had always looked away from him, afraid of his appearance, of his reputation, of stories that followed him wherever he rode. He stood up and removed his helmet completely, holding it under his arm. The gesture felt important, like lowering a shield. The gas station clerk stepped outside, finally realizing what had happened. "Everything okay out here?" he asked. "Yeah," the biker answered. "Thanks to her." The clerk looked at the girl, then back at the biker, surprised. The girl's shoulders relaxed a little as she realized she wasn't in trouble. Traffic continued to flow, but slower now, as if the road itself had calmed. The biker reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water from his saddlebag. He placed it gently on the ground near her. For the shock, he said, "Take it." "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a short nod, then glanced at his motorcycle. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the urge to leave quickly. He felt grounded, connected to the moment. The road had almost taken him, and a brave voice had pulled him back. As he swung his helmet back on, he paused. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," she said. "Well, Emily," he replied, "I won't forget this." He started his bike, the engine rumbling deep and familiar. Before riding off, he looked back once more. The girl waved slightly. He raised 2 fingers in return, a quiet sign of respect. As the biker disappeared down the highway, a rumor would soon spread through the small town. Not about fear or danger, but about the day a child's warning changed a feared biker forever. The biker rode for miles before he realized his hands were still shaking. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, familiar and empty, but his thoughts refused to settle. The girl's voice, "Be careful," kept replaying in his mind, louder than the engine beneath him. He had survived storms, crashes, and fights, yet a simple warning from a child had shaken him more than any of it. He slowed down and pulled off near an old rest stop, one of those forgotten places with cracked pavement and rusted benches. Turning off the bike, he sat there in silence. For once, the road didn't call him forward. Instead, it pushed him inward, forcing him to face memories he usually outran. He remembered how his reputation had grown over the years. One fight exaggerated into 10 stories. One mistake turned into a legend. People stopped seeing the man and only saw the leather jacket, the scars, the bike. Eventually, he had stopped correcting them. Fear kept people at a distance, and distance felt safer. But that girl hadn't seen fear. She had seen danger. The biker leaned back on the bench and looked at the sky. He thought about the way she'd stood her ground, how her voice had cut through everything. She hadn't judged him. She hadn't hesitated. She had simply acted. That kind of courage wasn't loud or violent, it was honest. Later that evening, he rode into a small town and stopped at a diner. Normally, this was where whispers started and eyes followed him. Tonight was no different at first. Conversations dipped. A waitress hesitated before approaching his booth. "What'll it be?" she asked carefully. "Coffee. And a burger," he replied, calm and polite. She nodded and walked away, surprised by his tone. When the food arrived, he thanked her. When an old man dropped his cane nearby, the biker stood up and picked it up without a word, handing it back gently. The old man looked up, confused, then nodded in appreciation. Something subtle shifted in the room. The biker noticed it too. He wasn't trying to change the world or erase his past, but he realized he could choose what came next. One small action at a time. Just like one small warning had saved him. As night fell, he paid the bill and left a tip larger than usual. Outside, he sat on his bike and thought about Emily again. He wondered if she knew how powerful her voice had been, how it had followed him down the road and into his thoughts. He started the engine but didn't speed off. Instead, he rode slower, more aware, watching the road and the people around him. The feared biker was still there, but now, so was something else. Respect. And somewhere in a small town, a girl went home unaware that her courage had started a change that would travel far beyond that gas station, riding endlessly along the American highways. Morning came quietly on the open highway. The biker had spent the night at a cheap roadside motel, the kind with flickering lights and thin curtains. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash of the truck, felt the rush of air, heard that small but powerful voice cutting through the noise. It followed him like a shadow he couldn't shake. After sunrise, he packed up and got back on the road. The engine roared to life, familiar and steady, but something inside him felt different. He wasn't riding to escape anymore. He was riding to think. A few miles ahead, traffic slowed. An accident had blocked one lane. A car stalled on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. Most riders would have passed by. He slowed down. Without overthinking it, he pulled over and walked toward the car. Inside sat a young mother and her son, panic clear on their faces. "Car won't start," she said nervously, eyeing his jacket. "It's okay," he replied calmly. "Let's get you safe." He helped push the car farther off the road and waited with them until roadside help arrived. When the tow truck finally came, the woman whispered, "Thank you," like she hadn't expected kindness from someone like him. That word, someone like him, stung more than he expected. Back on the bike, he understood something clearly for the first time. Fear wasn't just something others felt around him. It was something he had worn like armor. And armor, once useful, had slowly become a cage. Later that day, he stopped at a community park to stretch his legs. Children played near the swings. Parents watched carefully. When he walked past, a few of them stiffened. He almost kept walking, old habits pulling him away, but then he noticed a little girl sitting alone on a bench, tying her shoe. For a split second, he thought of Emily. He gave the girl a polite nod and kept his distance, sitting at the far end of the bench. No words, no pressure, just presence. When her shoelace slipped again, he quietly pointed and said, "Looks loose." She fixed it and smiled. That smile stayed with him. As evening approached, he rode again, the road stretching wide and open. He realized that what happened at the gas station wasn't just a close call, it was a turning point. A reminder that being feared wasn't the same as being strong. Real strength showed up quietly, in moments when no one expected it. The biker didn't know where the road would take him next. He didn't know if the past would ever stop chasing him. But he knew this much. One warning had changed how he saw the world, and how he wanted the world to see him. And somewhere deep inside, he hoped that one day, if their paths crossed again, he could tell Emily that her voice hadn't just saved his life. It had changed it. By the time the biker reached the outskirts of the next town, the sky had turned gray with approaching rain. He welcomed it. Rain always washed the road clean, the same way he hoped it could wash away parts of his past. He pulled into a small grocery store parking lot to wait it out, shutting off the engine as the first drops hit the pavement. Inside the store, the air smelled of coffee and old shelves. A few locals glanced up, their expressions cautious but curious. He didn't blame them. He had worn fear for so long that people had learned to expect it. Still, he stood quietly in line, hands visible, giving space. When his turn came, he paid without a word and stepped aside. Near the entrance, a man argued loudly with the cashier. His voice rose, sharp and impatient. The cashier, an older woman, looked overwhelmed. Customers shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to step in or step away. The biker felt the tension instantly. Once, scenes like this had followed him. Once, he might have been the cause. He took a slow breath and stepped closer, not aggressively, not threateningly. "Hey," he said calmly, "let's slow this down." The man turned, clearly expecting trouble. But the biker didn't raise his voice or his fists. He simply stood there, steady and grounded. "She's doing her job," he continued. "We can fix this without yelling." For a long second, no one spoke. Then the man muttered something under his breath, paid, and left. The store felt lighter, as if everyone had exhaled at once. The cashier looked at the biker, surprise clear in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded. "No problem." Outside, the rain fell harder. He leaned against his bike, watching the water run along the curb. A young employee came out to gather carts and hesitated when she saw him. "Storm's getting bad," she said awkwardly. "Yeah," he replied. "Be careful out there." The words caught him off guard as soon as he said them. Be careful. The same words that had saved him. He realized how easily warnings, when spoken at the right time, could protect instead of harm. When the rain eased, he rode through town slowly. People noticed. A man outside a bar gave him a small nod. A woman walking her dog didn't cross the street. These were tiny things, almost invisible, but to him, they mattered. By nightfall, he stopped at a modest motel. As he parked, the clerk inside smiled politely instead of nervously. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the beginning of something new. He lay on the bed later, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how stories spread. Not all at once, but person to person, moment to moment. The feared biker's name would still carry weight. But now, another story was forming beside it, a quieter one. A story about a man who chose calm over chaos, presence over fear. And it all began with a child's warning that taught him how powerful care could be when spoken out loud. The road eventually led him back the same way it had taken him out. After days of riding, the biker found himself turning toward the familiar stretch of highway near the old gas station. He hadn't planned it, but some places pull you back when unfinished feelings remain. As the town sign came into view, his chest tightened, not with fear, but with purpose. The gas station looked the same. Faded paint, buzzing lights, and trucks rushing past without care. He parked his bike and removed his helmet, standing still for a moment as memories rushed in. He could almost hear the warning again, sharp and brave against the roar of traffic. Inside the store, the same clerk worked the counter. Recognition flickered across the man's face. "You're the biker," he said, uncertain. "Yeah," he replied. "I came back to say thanks. To the girl who warned me. Do you know her?" The clerk smiled slowly. "Emily. She comes by after school sometimes." As if on cue, the door opened and Emily stepped in, backpack slung over one shoulder. She froze when she saw him, eyes widening. He immediately took a step back and lowered his head slightly, not wanting to scare her. "Hi," he said gently. "I didn't forget." She studied him for a second, then relaxed. "You're okay," she said. "Because of you," he answered. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small reflective keychain shaped like a road sign. He placed it on the counter. "For safety," he said. "So drivers see you at night." Emily smiled. "Thank you." The clerk watched quietly, understanding more than words could explain. Outside, traffic roared on, careless as ever. But inside that small store, something felt complete. The biker knelt slightly so he was at eye level. "What you did mattered," he told her. "You didn't just help me. You changed how I ride, and how I live." She shrugged shyly. "I just didn't want you to get hurt." He nodded, deeply moved. "That's enough." When he stepped back onto the road, the town felt different, not because it had changed, but because he had. People no longer looked away as quickly. Some even waved. The legend of fear was slowly being replaced by something stronger and rarer. As he rode off, the biker didn't chase speed or distance. He rode with awareness, carrying a lesson that would stay with him forever. Sometimes, the bravest voices are the smallest, and sometimes, being saved is the first step toward becoming someone worth remembering. The highway stretched ahead, endless and open. And this time, the biker rode it not as a feared figure, but as a man shaped by kindness, guided by a warning that became his compass.